Welcome to the Elevate podcast. Belinda Gates has said, when women are in leadership, the whole world benefits. Today's conversation showcases the truth of that statement. Hello and welcome to Elevate, a Women's Leadership Institute podcast. We talk about the intersection of gender, leadership, and the modern workplace. So excited to have Jeanette Bennett with us here today. I've heard her name and read about her in many places, but it was just until recently that she was able to come on the podcast, and I'm so excited to have her here. Usually what we like to do, because you have so many titles, so many accomplishments that you've done, I would like you to introduce yourself.
That's great.
And help us know a little bit about you from what you want to share.
Great. Well, I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to spend time with you, whether we recorded this conversation or not. We need to we need to hear all each other's stories. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.
So my current title, I'm the Executive Managing Director and CEO of Colliers, Utah.
Okay.
So I just took that career pivot 9 months ago, which we'll probably talk a little bit about. I'm still the CEO of Bennett Communications, which is a magazine publishing company. So we publish Utah Valley Magazine and Business Q Magazine, as well as Pray to Homes magazines and lots of different titles that people either hire us to do or that we've done along the way. So that's been 25 years that I've been doing that. And I'm involved in a lot of other things. I'm the vice chair of UVU's Board of Trustees, Utah Valley University. I'm the chair of the United Way of Utah County. In fact, they're waiting for me to do a DocuSign signature here, so I've got it over here, keeping my eye on that. So I juggle a lot of different things. I'm also on the board at Thanksgiving Point, which is near where we are right now, and a chief visionary officer there working on a science and tech center, which will be a few years in the making, but it's bringing together a lot of my relationships and ideas from being a journalist and being involved in the economic development of the state. So those are some of my titles. I'm also a mom of 5 and a grandma of 1.
Really?
And,
okay,
yes,
your
just
first
became a grandma
grandchild.
last year, right before I took this job, actually. So 2024 had a lot of firsts for me.
That's exciting. Okay, will you tell us 2 things? Will you tell us a little more about Colliers?
Yes.
And maybe first, would you share just a fun fact about us? Maybe you like to walk barefoot in the rain. Maybe you love to do karaoke. Maybe, something personal fun about you.
Okay. I could walk 8 hours a day. I just love walking. And I like to be alone. I live a very extroverted life, but I like to walk. And when I'm a runner, which is not currently, but I have been a half marathoner in the past, I like to be alone. I like to process things. I sing to myself. I pray. I listen to podcasts. I do Marco Polo.
Yeah.
Do you know that app? Yeah, I can hardly drive without pulling open Marco Polo. I have a few friends I talk to every day on there, so it's really, really fun.
So that's like your recharge time.
It is, yeah. Okay. It's everything to me. I miss it. I did a lot of it in COVID. Yes. I had more time for that and wasn't putting on high heels or makeup very often, so I spent a lot of time out on the trail. It was really, really beautiful.
I love that.
So I love that. I hike Mount Timpanogos every year. This will be my 14th straight year.
On like a specific date, or just you hike it during the year?
No, just in the year. So July or August, sometimes September, early September. I have one friend, Michelle Lewis. We do it together, and other people often join us. So that's something. I wouldn't do it more than once a year. It's quite a hike.
Yes.
And leading up to it, we're always like, are we really going to do this again? Are we really going to do this again? And then we do it again, and then we do it again the next year. But I love that. Mount Timpanogos is a foundational piece of our community.
Yeah, it is.
And it's a lot of ways people can tell whether they're going east or west by looking at that mountain and other mountains like that. And so I like being at the top of it. It helps my perspective. It helps me breathe. And in fact, I went through a cancer journey the year of COVID 2020, and I was very resistant to some of the treatments and plans that were being recommended. And that year when I hiked Timpanogos, it was from the top of the mountain that I called Huntsman Cancer Center and was like, okay, let's schedule this. I can do this. Because I just had to clear my mind and accept some of the things that were happening to me. So the mountain has become really symbolic and significant to me.
Yeah. What a beautiful metaphor.
Thank
and
you.
Resilience, too. You're like, climb this mountain. I've done lots of things. I can do this.
I can do this.
Thing.
Yeah. A mountain looks insurmountable from the bottom. But if you just keep moving your feet, you can do it. And then if you're with people you love to be with, the time goes faster.
Absolutely.
So there's lots of lessons to learn on the mountain.
I love that. Someone once said, how do you climb a mountain? 1 footstep at a time, right?
That's the only way to do it.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. I want to go into, you mentioned that you publish many magazines, and one of them is the UV50. To acknowledge companies in Utah County. And And one of the awards in there is the Triple Crown.
Mm-hmm.
Would you explain that to us and what that
Yes.
is and maybe who some of those players are?
Yes, for sure. So I started Utah Valley Magazine in 2000.
Yes.
In 2003, I started Business Q Magazine.
Okay.
Q is for quarterly. One of my favorite magazines for years, even before I started my own magazine, is Inc Magazine.
Yes.
And the Inc 500 issue is candy to me. It
Okay.
is just so fun when that rolls off
Yeah.
the press. And I like to circle any companies that are in Utah or Idaho, the two states that are my states. And some of the companies I don't know, many of them I do know. And so I just love getting that edition. So when I started Business Q, I kept thinking, I want to do this for our community. And originally I thought I'll do the UV 100. I'll name the top 100 businesses. Well, it's a very big task. So it became the UV 50 before before it even went to print. And the first year that I did it was 2008. And the idea was to name the top 50 businesses. And under that umbrella, 10 of them are startups. So that's less than 4 years operating history. And then we do 30 that are fastest growing. Same formula as Inc. 500. And then we name 10 economic engines, basically the companies. Maybe they're not growing as fast, but they are the top employers. So these are the people we have to thank that we have jobs and that we have a tax base and all
and they're
this.
doing something right.
They're doing something right. And so we identified those 50. And I was so excited that first year, 2008. I did not realize how hard it would be. The very first year we did it in our spring issue. So the year ends.
Okay.
And we're like, okay, by February 15th, we want all your financials. We want to rank your companies. We want we actually accomplished it, but it killed us. So it then moved to summer, and it's now fall. Our fall issue every year is UV 50. And so we still recognize companies in those three categories. And then over time, we started seeing how cool it was that there were companies that had been startups to watch.
Yeah.
And then once they're past their 4 years operating history, they have the math potentially to make the list where we do the percentage growth over the 4 years. So we have had companies that had been startups and then fastest growing, and then some of them were becoming what we were considering these economic engines.
Yeah.
And so a few years
what a
in,
beautiful little pipeline.
right? Beautiful to tell the story of an entrepreneur in an entrepreneurial state.
Exactly.
So we decided to call that the Triple Crown Award, meaning they had been on all three lists.
I love that name. Yeah.
And that was exciting. What we realized is not every year do we have a Triple Crown winner. It's someone that has now hit 3. So we
Not yet.
Not yet. Yes, I love that word. So on years we don't have a Triple Crown winner, we do a Lifetime Achievement Award. So every year someone enters what we call our Hall of Fame, either by being a Triple Crown winner, which is really hard to do, or being a Lifetime Achievement Award winner, which we've done. Gail Miller, we've done Blake Roney, we've done people that the listeners would have heard of and that have been really fun. Fraser Bullock was one early on. Yeah. So that's been great. 2 Triple Crown winners that have been fun to follow. Savory Fund, Andrew Smith.
Okay.
So he has started and helped build these restaurants, and those have been some startups to watch. Very fastest growing every year. Some of his brands are on that list, and then we consider Savory, which is the overall company that has Swig, Mobetta's, R&R, VA313. To be one of our economic engines. They've been one of the big real estate players in the state and employers.
Finding places for all the restaurants.
Yes, exactly. And employing our high school and college age and beyond and people. And so they've been a Triple Crown winner. Domo was also one. So when one of the ways we pick our startups is if the founder has a track record. They've done other companies. And then when they start their new thing, we're like, well, of course we're going to bet on this person.
Right.
So we bet on Josh James coming out of mycomputer.com, which became Omniture, which sold to Adobe. And we followed that whole story through the years in Business Q. So when he started Domo, we named it a startup to watch. It then, over time, hit our fastest growing and has been on our economic engine list as well. Yeah. So that was another Triple Crown winner. And we like to, when we have those, so that particular year, when we honored Josh, he loves BYU. So we had Cosmo come. We had the dunk team come. We even had Josh come out in the Cosmo uniform, and nobody knew it was him.
Did he dance? Did he do something?
So we had real Cosmo out there dunking, and then we did a little switcheroo where Josh came out. He was Cosmo. And then when he took off the head, people thought, he had been dunking.
Yeah.
So it was a little tricky thing. And Andrew is a car collector, so we had him come out on stage in a miniature car with his long legs sticking out. And so we try and tailor things to the people that we're honoring. So it's really fun. It's been amazing for me to create special moments for these people. Yeah. One of the more memorable Lifetime Achievement Award moments was with Warren Osborne, who ended up losing his battle to ALS a month later. So he had actually been on my list of people to honor, but because his outcome was uncertain, I hadn't reached out.
Okay.
And then this is a crazy story. The night before UV50, I had this feeling. Warren was still alive and doing, well-ish. And I texted him and said, I know this is so last minute, but could we honor you tomorrow? We were also honoring Gail Miller. So this was an additional thing. And he came and he was able to speak just a few words. Basically, I love Utah Valley. And his family shared some other remarks from him. Got a standing ovation from people who had watched him grow multiple businesses. And I feel like we created a special moment for him, for his family, and for the community.
Yeah.
A way to say thank you and goodbye. And so knowing that I've created these moments where people meet each other, they learn each other's stories, I think get inspired by each other, that really lights me up.
Yes.
That's really fulfilling for me.
There is so much power in storytelling,
Agreed.
as you know.
Mm-hmm.
Just at Sundance a couple weeks ago, they honored a couple who had been one of the first investors in Sundance.
Oh, wow.
And they were both able to stand up and say a few words and to be acknowledged. And it was just like, what a legacy to shape this state, right? And I love that they were there together and they both had things to say. And it was just really beautiful. So thank you for doing that for people who've contributed.
One of the things that I like to say is I think behavior that gets acknowledged gets repeated. So when we acknowledge the good, more good happens. And I think the reverse can be true.
100%.
If we acknowledge how hard things are, how bad someone is or whatever, then that can create more of the same. Yeah. So I've tried to add things to the community and to the business world that when I add this, if we have more of this, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like when we've acknowledged these entrepreneurs, that hopefully incentivizes them, motivates them, gets them up the next morning. Like, people are seeing me, even though this is hard. Like, people are seeing me and acknowledging the wins. So it's been an honor to be part of the community in that way.
Well, from a perspective of the Women's Leadership Institute, we often say that most of the time women and even, men, all of us, leave because we don't feel valued. Our contributions are not valued. They're overseen. They're not recognized. These companies that you tell their stories and interact with their leaders, what are they doing right in terms of that retention piece, in terms of engaging their teams? Because really, it's your teams that will drive you, right?
True. It is true. And every entrepreneur, every CEO that I've interviewed, they want to talk about their team.
Do they?
And I love it. It's hard as a writer sometimes to be like, how can I make it sound different this time? Because they're like, the team
great.
Deserves all the credit. Okay. But it's really true. And I love it when a leader knows that and will lift up their team. A lot of times when we go to interview a CEO and we want to photograph and interview him or her, and they're like, can I please have 30 people in the photo?
Yes.
And you're like,
yes,
it makes the photo less interesting, but I love the sentiment. I love the sentiment. So a lot of times we take it both ways. Let's do it both ways. Let's take one with you, one with the team. And if we can, we like to use both photos so that we can showcase what they want to showcase and also have like a stellar, meaningful photo of a founder. But I think the ones that really survive and thrive, they do create that culture. They create that team that wants to be there. So I love it at our UV50 and our 40 under 40 events. Those are the two big business events that we do each year. When people don't just come, they don't just buy one ticket for the CEO to go, but they bring the team.
Yes.
And they make it make it really cool.
Yeah.
Mixers, the year that they were named the fastest growing company.
Yeah.
So they topped that part of our UV50 list. They that night had bought a Mixer's pink Jeep and had it in the parking lot. No one knew about it, and they bought 3 tables for their team. They had told their team, they didn't know how they were going to rank.
Right.
Jess knew. She knew she was going to be number 1, but no one else knew. And so they were all there for this big moment, and then they celebrated by showing them the Jeep afterwards, which they've all used, and it's a team gift. And I thought, wow, that was a way to really capitalize on a moment.
Yeah.
And really have this very highly photographed moment where they could celebrate and say this was all of us. I think that helps with retention. If you're in a team photo and you're on the website and you're part of the story and you're part of the press release, it's harder to walk out the next day to the other job for $1,000 more because you're a little more committed to that. So I think teams that include everyone in the story and in the PR, that's a retention tool. It's also a thank you tool.
Yeah.
It's a positive win. So whether that's done on social media or traditional press releases or media kits or however you do it, the more you can get your team involved, I think it buys some loyalty.
They were
In,
all
in a
this
sincere
together.
way. I'm not saying it would be insincere.
No.
In a sincere way.
It wouldn't work if it was insincere.
No, it wouldn't.
Yeah.
It wouldn't.
It's like the term that came to mind when you were talking about that is emotional PR.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yep. Spinning it for connection in all the best ways. Something you were talking about, I laugh because Pat is the same way on our team. You know, people want a picture of her and she's like, no, Patty and Nicole, like they need to be in it. This is our team. We do this together, which is a beautiful sentiment.
Absolutely.
A couple of our cohorts that we teach, though, are individual contributors or women coming up in the pipeline who need the ability to showcase the value they bring. And sometimes it's hard to do when you're always like, the group did it. There's some pieces of that you have to say, no, I did the most of this, or So how have you learned to manage that? Because it needs to be both, right? There has to be a way to do both and do both graciously.
Yes. So I actually think we as women could get better at this, because I think we don't want to take all the credit and all this, but sometimes that can come across as a lack of confidence, and you don't want that. You do want to showcase confidence. I've actually been thinking a lot about confidence lately. I judged Miss Utah a year and a half ago, and it was fascinating. I also, Governor Cox appointed me to the 4th District Judicial Commission. So everyone who wants to become a judge in the 4th District has to go through my small committee, and we interview them. So I'm talking like beauty pageant 22-year-olds, lawyers and judges wanting to be on the bench. And I have a LinkedIn post swirling up here about this, but
stay tuned. We'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. Confidence. In the first few seconds you walk in a room or you have an interaction with someone, you do want to exude confidence. Now, that's not arrogance, and that's not narcissism. I think my favorite people have a combination of confidence and humility. And they're not mutually exclusive. The combination of the two of them is a beautiful thing. But I think at times as women, we'd need to own our stories a little bit more and not and check our intentions, right? So if we're trying to include the team, that's great. But are we doing it as a way to hide, or are we truly doing it for them? You know, and we shouldn't be hiding. We shouldn't be hiding at all. We need to be exhibiting our stories and owning our stories. And honestly, one reason, and not to change the subject right away, but one of the reasons that I took this job at Colliers after agonizing for 7 months and driving everyone around me crazy trying to decide was that I thought, I think this is good for women, because this is a very male-dominated industry, and it's a state where women aren't always in those top roles. You know, we haven't had a female governor, we haven't had a female senator, we have there's lots of roles women have not had, and the visibility women have not had. And so one reason that I eventually said yes to this was for my daughters, and was for the women I mentor and the women I write about, to just say, you know what? Yeah, this is a male industry, but I can do this. I can do this. And I actually have found
here's how I'm going to
do it. And I'm going to be open about that. I haven't posted as much as I'd like to lately because I've been so busy, but I'm going to get going again. But because I have a lot of stories I want to share and things that I'm learning. I've been kind of in a learning hibernation mode, and I'm really excited to share a lot of things that I've been learning. But you know, women are very equipped to be leaders. I lead 200 people at our Colliers community in Utah. We have four offices in Utah, and a mix of brokers who are commission-based and do retail or office or industrial or land or a mix, and then office staff that produce the marketing and the mapping and accounting and all of those wonderful roles. Out of our top 25 agents, only one is a woman. And you know, there hasn't been a woman in this type of role. But I find that men, I think, find me easy to talk to, and so do women. I actually think that my journalism background is part of it. That as my teammates come in and have things they need to talk through or decisions they're going through with, like, I'm someone that they can talk to. They can express emotion, happy or sad. And I actually think that women make great leaders for that reason. When I finally did come to terms with Colliers, which is a global company, it's a global publicly traded company, and I'm in the Utah version. So I have a boss in LA who everyone in my role reports to him. in the Western U.S. And when he's not from Utah, and he and I only met each other through this process, but we did get to know each other fairly well over those months as he came here and I went there, and lots of different conversations. And right at the end, when I agreed to come and we were agreeing on terms, he said, "You know what I think really prepared you for this? It's that you're a mom." And I thought, okay, I know. There is so much to unpack. There is so much to unpack, because I'm like, should I be offended right now? He literally said that. And I'm like, okay, but I have like degrees, and I've run a company, and I was named top woman entrepreneur in media, and I Silicon Slopes Hall of Fame, and like, I'm a mom. Like, but then, as I thought about it, I thought, well, I can choose how to react to this.
Yeah.
I can choose.
Yeah.
And I think he meant it positively, and I have found it to be true. Like, when I am working with my team, I find a lot of my motherhood skills actually do come out. Of course, my business skills do too.
We bring out your mom voice. Is
well,
that what you're saying?
At times there's siblings that have a little disagreement, and we're working through that, or things that didn't quite get done that should have gotten done. And but as I've shared that experience with other women, I get lots of different reactions of anger, and also, well, that was nice that he acknowledged that there is some value, air quotes, in motherhood. Yes. Well, absolutely there is.
Right.
It's leadership.
Depending on how you took what he said, it could be diminutive, right? Like,
right,
from being a mom.
Yeah. Or
like, wow, you learned these from being a mom. Of course you can do this.
Right. Right. And so I've chosen to see the positives in it. But and I do think, when I have friends of mine who didn't work on their career as they were raising their families, and then they are ready to transition out, and I've had this conversation with many of them as they're trying to decide what to do. I tell them, no, you can do this.
Yes.
Look what you've been doing.
Piece.
You can do this. You've been running a family budget. You have been negotiating with school counselors. Yeah. You have been, you've been running the PR for your child.
Exactly.
So there actually really are a lot of skills that women utilize at home that translate to the business world. So, and I don't say that in any sort of demeaning way, and I don't think my boss meant it that way either. It's actually true. So let's own that and be proud of that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for bringing that up. Right before we started, we kind of talked about how we don't want to compartmentalize, right? The moms here and the leaders here,
right?
All the same person.
It's all the same person. And when I see my life has been a mix. And because I'm an entrepreneur and I owned my company, I was able to mix that. I took kids to work and I brought work from home. Before there was remote work, I was doing all of that because I could. And it was honestly the only way I could have raised, because I chose to have 5 kids and also wanted a career. So it was the way for me is to mix it all. One of my kids got asked, "Does your mom work full time?" And they were like, "Huh." They weren't really familiar with that term because that's not how we think of it. It's just sort of like, well, she does a lot of stuff, but it's like that idea of, are you full time or part time?
Right.
They just saw it as a mix, which I really enjoyed because that's how I see it too. This is my life. These are the pieces of it, and the pieces have grown and shrunk over time. Every year I had a baby, I backed off a little bit from work and then would ramp back up and then have it's been a different looking pie every year of my life. And but I own that. And I think I could have, and I'm at peace with this, but I think I could have built a bigger business if I hadn't wanted to also be home after school on most days, or if I hadn't wanted to have 5 children or something. But it was a conscious choice to be like, I'm gonna maintain this business, grow what I can, but I'm not gonna do it at the peril of these other goals I have. So it's been a balance. It's been a juggle for sure.
I actually heard you say that an interview is, part of defining success is not only what you want to make, but the size of company you want to run, how many people on your team, right? Your output. And I really appreciated that because that's true. Those are all part of it.
Those are all metrics of success.
Those are all metrics that you have to decide and be very thoughtful and intentional. Because nobody wants to get to the end and be like, oh, that is not what I wanted. Right. Why did I do that? So
we have to own our stories. And those metrics are different. And they're different often for men and women.
Okay. They don't have to be the same.
And they've been different for me every stage of life.
Yes.
So it's not like you decide your metrics one time.
No.
You redecide them. Over time.
Absolutely. So a couple things. I want to pick up Colliers in a minute, but I want to stop here at this. 2000, you started your magazine. And
I was 25.
And you had graduated and you sold your house to pay for the first issue.
Yes.
And the impetus to that, well, one of them was that you were pregnant and you were going to have a child and you wanted some of that flexibility. So I have two questions around that.
Okay.
A, you were with Deseret News before. Did you ever go to them and have the conversation of, can this be flexible? I want part of this, but do you really do that? So that's my first question. And the second question is, I've noticed that lots of women, after having children, become entrepreneurs and build their own businesses because the structures are so rigid, even still. We're getting better, but even still. So specific that for your situation and then kind of overall.
Right. So the Deseret News, I loved that job.
Yeah.
I really did. And I felt like I had a promising future there. I was expecting my first child. I'd been there I started as an intern and then stayed on. So it'd been about 1.5 years. And so not even that long of a time.
Okay.
Yeah, really wasn't that long. Well, at the time I thought, oh, this is so long. And I look back and that was a blink of an eye. But when I went to have him, I worked until I went into labor. And I was like, I'll be back in 6 weeks. I had 3 days of paid maternity. That was all. But I would, they were going to let me have my job back.
As soon as you're out of the hospital, you got to come back.
I know. But they would hold my job. I needed to come back in 6 weeks. But and I told them that I would. But the thing was, there was no remote work.
Wasn't a thing.
No, it wasn't a thing. You had to be there on site. And at this time, the Deseret News was an afternoon paper. We were working during the days, and then on the weekends we'd work. The paper came out Saturday morning, Sunday morning.
Right.
So there was a Friday night shift and a Saturday night shift, which I thought was fun, actually, to kind of shake up the work week. But as I just looked at this, I looked at this brand new baby that I loved, and I was nursing him, and I just thought, like, no, nobody can do this but me, and I just can't do it. I didn't, childcare was such an insurmountable obstacle to me at the time. I hadn't had working women modeled for me from my mom and aunts and neighbors. And honestly, I just couldn't see how it could work. And so I just was like, I guess this is an either or.
Oh, interesting.
The me of today, who is better at advocating for myself, would have asked a few more questions, But the options that were presented to me that I didn't really fight back on were come back full-time in person or you're gone.
Well, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
I know.
Yeah.
It's really true. And so I didn't go back. And that was a hard decision in that I loved the job, but it also felt like the obvious decision. So it wasn't like I agonized over whether I'd made the right decision because I felt like I did. But it was shortly after that, very shortly after that I was like, well, what can I do? Because I had a fresh, bachelor's and master's degree and experience, and I like to work, and the baby sleeps several hours a day, and I don't really like to cook. I'm definitely not going to sew. What else am I going to do? And that's when my entrepreneurial brain kicked in. I had done a minor in business at BYU.
Yeah.
As part of my bachelor's degree, but it's because I thought I'd write about business.
Yeah.
I still like writing about business. But that was my reason. It wasn't because I thought I would start a business. That didn't click on for me until I became a mom. And then it was like bright lights, obvious. But it wasn't obvious to me until that moment when my new metric was flexibility. That was everything.
I love that. Okay, new metric, and then the resilience, back to that, being able to choose a new path and still continue on.
Yeah, and I had my positivity / naivety.
Sometimes they're good.
That I was like, of course this is going to work. Of course it is. Yeah. And there were a few iterations that I maybe won't go into of just newsletters and different projects that I did before Utah Valley Magazine launched with my husband, his brother, and that brother's wife. There were the 4 of us that worked on that first issue. The other 2 sold ads, and my husband was designing things, a graphic designer, and I was writing things and running the money.
Oh, okay. It's a good team.
And it was going to work. There was no other option in my head.
Yep.
Other people around me were like, do you know the percentages of businesses that fail? And I blah, 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 blah.
80, 90%.
I can't hear you. I really had just blinders on in a good way of, no, this is going to work. Plus, I knew the metrics of what it would take for us to live as a family. We had been poor college students. Both my husband and I, our parents, our dads, our school teachers. We had never gotten used to anything nice. So it was like, well, we can live on nothing. I know how to do that.
What a good time to start it.
But I had 2 kids by the time the first issue of Utah Valley Magazine came out. So, kids do cost money, and I was a little unrealistic on life, but but it all worked out. It really worked out. I mean, those first few years were tough. We didn't have employees. We didn't have an office at first.
Sure.
And then as those things started to happen, the metrics changed, and we needed to add more magazines, and we needed to beat our goals and increase our revenue, which we figured out ways to do. But every step of the way, it was like, what's the need? What's the need? We'll figure out the solution, and always driven by that. Never took on an investor, which is amazing. Never had a bank loan until we built our office, and then we had a loan on the building.
And that was intentional.
It was intentional, and now that's paid off, and it's different things. But I was very glad not to have to answer to investors. It kept things flexible. I think investors at times when I was having babies and kind of like, let's just do status quo this year, they would have been like, no, Q4 needs to be 25% larger than last year, and I didn't want or need that pressure. So that was nice. Nice.
Where did that ability come from? Is that showcased in your mother and your father? Was that like a best friend growing up? Because not everyone has that ability to say, I'm going to do this my way. Right? I'm going to be really intentional about this, but I'm really positive. I don't need to know the how. I'm just going to jump into this.
That's a great question. We don't come from entrepreneurial families, and so I don't feel like I had this perfect model that I was just following step by step.
Sure.
I loved reading when I was little, and I loved reading about strong women, and I think all of that kind of got added up in me, where I was like, no, there are strong women. There's the ability to do that. Also, I think I'm just naturally a little bit stubborn.
Okay.
A little bit different. I don't know. Where I was like, I'm going to figure this out, and I had a lot of teachers that were wonderful from elementary school, high school, college, that would say things like, oh, you could do anything. They would build me up. They would build me up and make me feel like I could do anything.
Yeah. Back to that value piece we were talking about.
For sure. And I really relied on some of their ideas at times. I had a bishop, a religious leader, who in high school, I was sitting there in church and hadn't started yet, and he walked over and he handed me a Women in Business magazine.
Okay.
So I was probably 15 or 16.
Oh, okay.
And I probably looked at him like, what's this weird guy doing giving me a magazine?
Right,
I probably didn't.
What do you want to do
I
with
didn't know
this?
how to react. But I read the magazine, and it did two things for me. First of all, the content of the magazine was inspiring. Second of all, I thought, he believes in me. He believes enough in me to think she needs to read this, and she's of value. She's the type of woman that's written about in this, or could be the type of woman written about in this. And both pieces of that, the actual content and the act of him choosing to show me that much respect and belief, I've never forgotten that, and that's now been however many, 35 years or something, and he's passed on, and he, and that moment was the lifetime. My lifetime has several of those little moments.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, I'm going to keep my eyes open, because I think maybe there's something ahead for me that could be cool.
Those moments.
So I've tried to be that person for others. I know I could do better, and
Can't we all?
It's sometimes overwhelming, the high school and college students that want to be mentored and that send you LinkedIn messages. I'm like, I desire to do all of this.
Yeah.
I desire to, but sometimes I don't always have all the time to do everything I'd like. But I think we can all lift other people up, and to our nieces and nephews or whoever we come in contact with, to shine a light on what could be for them. And honestly, I mean, I talk about how I don't have time, but honestly, it only really takes 15 seconds to do something small, to tell someone, I love the way you think, or just something like that.
Absolutely.
Give them something to chew on.
That matters.
Yeah.
I really love that piece. I think it's so important. And I think those are things that it's hard for us to see in ourselves. So it's so gracious of someone else to do them, and then you can build on it. So thanks for bringing that up. So let's fast forward to right now, from the selling of the house, the bishop giving you the magazine, building, okay. And this, months-long deliberation to take over CEO and managing director. And tell us, did you go in the bathroom and do did you have imposter syndrome? Did you do your power pose? Or by the time you took it, you're like, I'm ready. I'm ready to do this.
So Brandon Fugel, who's the biggest name in commercial real estate here in Utah, he and I have been friends a long time. We have crossed paths and sat on boards, and And I've written about him, done cover stories on him. He has supported my events and bought ads in my magazines. And we've had kids similar ages and things like that. And we co-chair the Science and Tech Center that will be built at Thanksgiving Point.
Okay.
So we were having a meeting about that. And then it was like a light bulb went on in his head. And he said, you know what? You should run Colliers. I need a new leader.
And you're like, wait, what?
I think I did laugh and was kind of like, oh, yeah, thanks. Really? And honestly, I thought he'll forget about this by tomorrow. Like, this is kind of a crazy idea. I know he has respect for me and we have done different things, but I'm not in real estate and I own a company. Like, I'm already kind of busy. So I thought that would probably be just kind of a fun conversation that died. And it didn't. He brought it up again and reached out. I'm like, well, okay, let me think about it. Let me talk to you some more. And Lou Kramer, who was the CEO who would be leaving, I met with him and I met with several people.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to go in eyes half closed at all. And also Brandon's a really good salesman and I didn't want him to sell me. I was like, no.
Okay.
You're not going to sell me. I'm going to decide. I decided.
There's a stubborn, but worked well for you this time. Yeah.
Because this is a big shift and I knew it would be a big PR moment and I have this company that I still own and what would it mean for that? So it just wasn't a decision I was going to make overnight or anything like that. And I dragged my feet and at times I leaned no and at times I leaned yes, but maybe not now. And they were patient. They were patient with me. And then it was one weekend when I was again making a pro-con list. I mean, I seriously drove everyone crazy trying to decide. I can be very analytical. And I was being very analytical about this. And what are the pros? What are the cons? And what could I learn? And what if I say no? And I could see both sides and all of that. And then it was one weekend when I just kind of thought I would be so stupid to turn this down. They came to me and want me to take this position in this field of economic development that works with the governor's office, that works with the LDS Church, that works with the academic institutions. And I started to think, no, this is brilliant. I can't believe I'm not. It all of a sudden became obvious, kind of a no-brainer to me. And so I decided to jump in. And from that moment on, I haven't looked back. I haven't thought, should I? I spent plenty of time analyzing the decision. There have definitely been moments where I'm like, wow, am I in over my head? Like, this is a lot. There's external parts of the job representing Colliers on boards and panels and speaking and working in, those public facing things, which I felt the most prepared to do.
Sure.
The internal workings, managing the people and managing the budget and making those decisions and approving expenditures and working on hiring, working on retention and all of that. That's a very large job. And then the third piece of the job is aligning with Colliers, with the global brand. So making sure that we're in alignment with their processes and helping. I've spoken at some of their events that are regional or national. And so being part of that ecosystem and sharing best practices with other people in my role. So I see my Colliers position as having those three categories. And they're all important and they all compete for my time and my mental bandwidth. But the juggle is, I've always been a juggler, I guess. And so I've added this to it. And I haven't been writing as much for the magazine. I've done some of the cover story interviews, but then had my staff do some of the ghostwriting for me. And so we've found some equilibrium in this new setup. And I feel really grateful. I feel stretched. I turned 50 last year and I just feel like, wow, to take on something new at this stage of life, it's invigorating. I find myself pulling off business books off my shelf because I care about them again. I'm like, okay, now how did you build a culture again? Because I began my other company 25 years ago. So to come in new, I care about all these things once again.
You're hungry again in a different way.
Yeah. I would love to go back to school. I have no time, probably won't. But I would love to go take more finance classes. And I just feel so thirsty for knowledge again. And so I love that. It's reinvigorated me.
I love that you said stretch. Because oftentimes we get in a comfort zone and we just put our heads down and we do what we do and we do it well. And at a certain point, there's a risk there too, right? What if you do it and you fail? Because all growth is risk because you've never done it before. But I don't really believe in failure. I believe in growth. And if we want to grow, we've got to push through it. Right. So You even your eye, like you had a sparkle in your eye when you were talking about the books and pulling them down from the shelf. And what a beautiful place that you've allowed for yourself.
I did a cover story on Stephen Covey, 2009, and of course he's written beautiful things, and much of our interview were things he's had in his books. But one of the things that stuck out to me in our interview was he said there's a difference between having 1 year of experience. Let's see, a difference between having 20 years of experience or 1 year of experience 20 times.
Oh.
And in some ways, the magazine started to feel just a touch like that because I was doing a lot of the same things. The financial metrics looked pretty much the same year after year. The size of the staff was stable, and so I was starting to feel like these aren't new years anymore. And even though I love it and it's opened the door to everything, it wasn't stretching me. I wasn't growing in some of the same ways, and so. This past year has not been same old. It's been very new, and I've met and I work with all new people that are now my best friends that I didn't know a year ago, and I'm using acronyms and language and understanding things that I didn't know before, and that feels pretty good. It feels really good.
Potential, I love it. Thank you for sharing that, and also for considering. All of the women in the state and around who can see you in that leadership role in a pretty male-dominated industry, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. I want to move on to the power of storytelling. We've touched on it. We've told some different stories. I believe that storytelling and communication creates reality.
I agree.
How you spin it, right? Like Emily Dickinson said, tell the truth, but tell it with slant. And everybody's slant is a little different.
So true.
Right? So what is the story? You started out with the story of your own family, crafting that, starting the magazine, and then Utah County, and then the economic drivers of our state, and now with Colliers, which is a global brand. What has been the story of our state, and what do you want the story of our state to be as far as economics and leadership? And
wow. Utah has a beautiful story.
Yes, it does.
And if you travel to Europe and other places in the world, there are centuries of stories, and Utah's story is relatively short, which is incredible when you think about it.
Yeah,
that it's not even been 200 years since the pioneers settled. I mean, I know there were people here already, but our story is fairly short, and it's still being written, and we have some exciting chapters ahead of us. Our story is largely one of starting with nothing. And that's what makes us good entrepreneurs is we're like, we're not just going to sit around and wait for someone to solve this for us. Let's figure it out. And I think that's a beautiful story. And there's different pieces of the story that, even in Utah County, you have Geneva Steel, you have Word Perfect, you have, and then you have families that have their own stories that have added to the fabric. So the Millers and the Eccles and now the Ashtons and the Smiths, Ryan and Scott Smith and Jared Smith, and these families all have their own stories, but their stories are actually quite similar. They all started from a very non-memorable place in a lot of cases, and then just keeping at it. I also think part of our story is I call it either karma or the secret or the law of restoration, whatever you want to call it. But it's when you give, when you put things out, then things return to you. And so I've written about so many companies and individuals who part of their story is they started this little nonprofit or they donate X amount of proceeds. And I really think that's part of the story of success for a couple reasons. I think that there is some energetic law of when you give, you're blessed.
Sure.
It also helps you when you don't keep everything you have, you give some of it away. I think it keeps money in a good perspective because you realize this isn't just about the accumulation. It's about the impact.
Yes.
And so it's that mindset, I think, is really a beautiful thing, and it's perpetuating because the more you experience that high,
I was just going to say
impact,
a high of that.
Yeah, there's more of it. So I think that's part of Utah's story as well.
Really well said. I like
that. And I think we're evolving, and we're in a really exciting time. We have these two counties, our two most populous counties, Salt Lake and Utah County, that used to have a very big divide. point of the mountain is a cultural, physical, geographic boundary. And that has changed as both counties have shifted their growth to the north of Utah County and the southern tip of Salt Lake County. That's where we are right now, right? And population has shifted that way, economic-based jobs. And so I think that that's part of our story, too, is taking previous barriers and saying, how could we actually work together? And we're better together. And setting down any preconceived notions or barriers of any kind, and seeing the beauty of coming together. And the point, which is the prison site that's now being reimagined.
Like the actual point.
I know it's confusing. We use a lot of the same words. But the point, the previous prison site, and Colliers is part of that. We're developing the office sector and the office buildings that will be there, which is going to be really exciting. So that's a perfect example of everyone coming together, and the state's been wise in selecting a lot of input from a lot of people. And because we don't want to get this wrong, this is this is more than a once in a lifetime, probably. This is a never opportunity to take the perfect land in the middle of the population base to start over. It's absolutely beautiful. So I think that's going to be that in and of itself, that project. Of course, I'm in a real estate mindset right now, but I think that project is going to tell Utah's story all by itself. People coming together, and there's going to be academics, and there's going to be residential, and there's going to be beautiful art installations. The collaboration of it all. And the possibilities. Anything's possible right now. And so that's been really cool to be part of those conversations. I was up at the state capitol when it was just getting started, and I helped testify, which ended up leading to a $50 million allocation from the state for Convergence Hall at the point. So it's fun to see some of these little moments turn into something that's going to be coming to fruition. So Utah has a lot ahead of us. We have the Olympics coming back in 9 years, and there's a lot of preparation and talk about that. I think as a state we have that common goal, which feels far away, but it's really not that far away. And there's a lot of things we're short on power in the state, so that's the thing that we're going to need to come together and figure out. It's going to hamper our economic development if we can't figure out sources of power. So that's gonna have to be a come together. This can't just be a win for someone. We got to figure out a win for everyone on that. So I'm really proud of Utah. I've loved telling its stories, and I love being part of the story now. I feel like what I'm doing now is largely economic development, but it all comes down to people. It all comes down to stories, like you're saying. And we're all the sum of our individual stories, and then the state is the sum of all of our stories. And it's really, really cool to see that. And I particularly love women's stories because they often have many chapters. And overlapping chapters. But I think, I thought as a young person that a lot of decisions were only going to be made once. What's my career going to be? Where am I going to live? And then to realize, there's a lot of chapters and there's a lot of decisions. That's fun, though,
Fun. Overwhelming sometimes.
Sometimes, yes.
But also such a possibility.
Right.
And to embrace that. I love what you said about the bridge building. As someone who didn't grow up in the state, it was really interesting to watch those two counties, right? And the divide sometimes that might happen.
The divide, I think, actually helped our magazines to get off the ground because at the time, Salt Lake had 2 strong newspapers, which I'd worked at one of them, and many TV stations and some magazines. And Utah County, which was the little sister down the road that people weren't paying that much attention to, it had a newspaper but no TV stations.
You saw a real niche there.
And it was like, well, Salt Lake's ignoring us. They think we're not that interesting.
So we're going to show them.
I'm going to wrap my arms around this county. and we purposely didn't try to write about or cover or feature people in Salt Lake because we're like, they have enough. We're just going to stay here and we're going to try and stay true to this county. And so that really was a boon to our publishing company. But now that the divides are coming down and we're melding more, that's a beautiful thing. It's not like I fought that or anything like that. I see that as a beautiful thing. And then as far as our magazines, we've had to adjust some of our own rules of whether we write about people in only Utah County or not. Because if someone moves to Bluffdale, they're like, can you still,
does that count?
Can I still be in your 40 under 40? So
that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, we've come out. We're a little vaguish on our audience now, just because we've adopted parts of the Wasatch Front.
Like you said, another opportunity for growth.
Exactly.
All the things.
All the changes.
Oh, well, it has been a delight. Thank you so much for joining us. As we close, is there any question? I'm sure that as you go about and do different things, people often ask you similar questions. If you were to talk to a 15-year-old girl now, the kind who was like that your bishop gave a magazine to, what would you want her to know? Both, hey, watch out for this, because most people don't talk about it, and it's going to be so exciting. Look out for this.
Mm-hmm. So I would definitely focus on the exciting parts of things. I think I would tell a young person, open doors, don't close them. Yeah, open doors. So that means, when you're in high school, get good grades, meet people. When you're at a friend's house, talk to their parents. Ask them what they do.
Yes, learn how to talk to adults.
Yes. And those people might end up being your clients, or might end up being somebody that could be part of your journey, and you might be part of theirs. So I just think opening doors. Don't be afraid of opening them all. You don't have to know which door you're going to ultimately walk through and walk 1,000 miles in that direction, but open them.
Just open them.
I also think just any experience is a good experience. This is what I also tell moms that are wanting to reenter the workforce. Okay. So serving in volunteering with a nonprofit, amazing. You're helping to set up an event. You're running a 5K. That is awesome. Yeah. Not only are you going to get experience, but you're going to meet people there that might have opportunities that are interesting to you. So, and high schoolers that are working at Del Taco or whatever, that is leadership. I mean, that is like the ultimate leadership.
If you can get other teenagers to work, well, good on you.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're dealing with a customer who's unhappy, or you're managing expectations of people, and you're looking people in the eye. Every experience that you get is a good one. So even if it's not the perfect one right at this moment, you're going to learn something, and you're going to meet someone, and it all adds up. Mm-hmm. I look back at the people that I thought I might only know a little bit in high school and college, and then I crossed paths with them again. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know life would be like this. I didn't know it would all weave together so beautifully. So keeping those doors open, treating people kindly, and opening your mouth, asking questions of people. We can learn a lot from each other, but sometimes we have to take that initiative. Yeah. Now, I often think about getting on an airplane, which I'm going to get on one tomorrow. And, if you sit down and don't make eye contact or talk to the person next to you, it's very hard 3 hours later to be like, so what do you do for a living? You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to change that. Yeah. So I say, just if you can, like, look people in the eye from the beginning and open that door. Open that door so that if you want to or need to, that it's open for you to have that conversation or to have that experience that might be important to you.
I love it. Full circle to you doing a new opportunity now, to anyone starting out in the pipeline. Explore, open your mouth, look for the positive, and don't worry about the how.
That is a great summary.
Okay.
Well done.
Thank you so much, Jeanette, for all you do.
It was fun to visit with you.
You too.